Sarah's mortgage was 3 weeks past due when the federal government shut its doors. For 76 days, the gridlock in Washington became a living nightmare, freezing her paycheck and shattering her safety net. We are not looking at budget committees or empty floor speeches today. Instead, we are tracing the human collapse of administrative order through one woman's struggle to survive when the gears of her own government finally ground to a total standstill. I'm talking about Meenu Batra. Her story is the one that reveals the true price of our divided systems, and the final detail I will share about her release is something that simply should not be possible in a functioning democracy. Sit back, grab a glass of water, and let us get into the reality of what happens when the gears of government stop turning. Meenu Batra is 53 years old. She is a woman who has spent over 35 years building a life in the United States. She is a single mother of 4 grown children, all of whom are American citizens. More importantly, she is a highly respected, state licensed court interpreter. In the vast landscape of Texas, she is the only person who holds a license to provide interpretation for Punjabi, Hindi, and Urdu. She is the bridge between the American justice system and the people who need it most. She arrived in the United States back in 1991, a survivor of religious violence in India where she had lost her own parents to horrific pogroms. In the year 2000, an immigration judge granted her withholding of removal, a formal recognition that returning her to her home country would put her life at direct risk. She did everything by the book. She built a career serving the courts, helping to ensure that the promise of due process actually applied to non-English speakers. She was a pillar of the legal community. But then, the system she served decided to turn its back on her. It was March 17th, 2026. Meenu was at the Valley International Airport in Harlingen, Texas. She was headed to Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a routine work assignment. Plainclothes ICE agents stepped out of the shadows. They did not show a warrant that made sense. They did not offer a clear explanation. They simply told her that she was being detained. She was pulled away from her life, her children, and her responsibilities as an officer of the court. She was taken to the El Valle detention facility in Raymondville. For 44 days, Meenu Batra lived a nightmare. She described the experience as a horror movie version of Groundhog Day. She was held in a windowless, concrete warehouse block. She was often kept for hours without food or clean water. She was denied her essential cholesterol medication for days on end. The most humiliating part? The officers made her pose for photos with her hands behind her back, trying to force the image of a handcuffed criminal, even when she was compliant and cooperating. Now, why was this happening? This was not an isolated mistake. This was the dark, chaotic reality of a 76-day federal government shutdown. When the gears of the federal bureaucracy grind to a halt, the people responsible for oversight vanish. The systems that are supposed to check for errors or uphold human rights go silent. People like Meenu get stuck in the cracks, left to rot in detention because there is literally no one working at the desk whose job it is to sign the paperwork for their release. It is political theater in Washington, D.C., but it is life and death in a detention cell in Texas. If you are finding this perspective helpful, please hit subscribe. I drop deep dives like this every week, and sticking around helps me keep pulling back the curtain on these systemic failures. Now, here is where things get truly interesting. The government tried to justify holding a woman with decades of legal residence and service to the state by claiming her work authorization was not the same as legal status. They were reaching for anything, trying to create a narrative of illegality where none existed. They were using the withholding of removal status against her, weaponizing the very law that was designed to protect her life. They effectively treated her as a disposable asset of the state, not as a human being. Meanwhile, hundreds of court cases across Texas were put on hold. Because she was the only licensed Punjabi, Hindi, and Urdu interpreter, the entire legal system for those language groups simply stopped functioning. The American Translators Association eventually weighed in, pointing out that by detaining a court officer, the government was actively eroding the trust required for public safety. They were cutting off the very hands that allowed their own courts to reach non-English speaking communities. All right, remember how I said I had a final detail about her release that shouldn't be possible? Here it is. It took the intervention of a federal judge, Rolando Olvera, to end the madness. On April 30th, 2026, Judge Olvera issued a scathing temporary restraining order. He looked at the government's case and found that they had, and I quote, no discernible reason for her arrest. None. The judge noted that the detention was an arbitrary violation of constitutional due process. She was released on May 1st, the very day the shutdown finally ended. She was released only because the system was forced to acknowledge the chaos it had created. Think about that for a second. She was a target of an unstaffed, dysfunctional, and panicked bureaucracy that didn't know who she was or why she was there. And yet, they held her for 44 days anyway. The irony is that Meenu had stopped taking government side contracts years ago, specifically because she had seen the poor conditions in these facilities while doing her job. She had seen the inside of that world as an advocate, and then, without warning, she was thrown into the middle of it as a prisoner. Her son, an officer in the United States Army, said something that still haunts me. He said, "I thought I would serve my country and serve my people, but I didn't know the people was everyone except my mom." Let that sink in. That is the feeling of a citizen who realized the system he defended was, in that moment, acting as an enemy to his own family. When we talk about government shutdowns as just lines on a spreadsheet or a delay in public services, we are missing the point. We are missing the reality that when the lights go out in the halls of power, the people trapped in the dark are often the ones who have done the most to serve the country. So, there you have it. The story of Meenu Batra is a stark reminder that administrative gridlock is never victimless. A woman who dedicated 20 years of her life to helping the American legal system function was reduced to a case number, held without a charge, and stripped of her dignity because a few hundred miles away, people in suits couldn't agree on a budget. If this story hit home for you, share it with someone who needs to see the real cost of political instability. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive. I am already working on a piece about how algorithmic sentencing is creating similar issues in our state courts, and I think it is going to change the way you look at the judge's bench forever. Stick around for that one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.